Welcome to part two of the Consumer Travel Marketing Masterclass series. Last week, we covered some of the basics, which platforms to utilize, looking back before looking forward with your plans, and a technique to build effective messaging platforms for your ideal customer profiles using the Story Brand 7-step framework. So today, we're going to take it a step further. But before we dive in, I want to take a few minutes to cover a topic that I should have covered last time around, and it's the importance of your brand. The best laid plans to build an effective consumer travel marketing strategy can often fail if the health of your brand is poor. All of that and much more coming up next on the Travel Insights podcast, powered by Battleface. Welcome, fellow travelers. Clay Coomer here, host of the Travel Insights podcast. And in this first segment titled Why Brand Matters, we're going to dive into some important aspects of brand design and why it is important to your holistic consumer travel marketing strategy. So let's dive into it. Brand is the beating heart of a company, providing blood flow and nutrients to all the vital organs to function. And I love the heart analogy when talking about a brand, because if something is wrong with a human heart, it impacts the rest of the body. And the same can be said with a brand. If you have brand issues, it will inevitably show up in areas of the company, namely revenue. So now think about what could happen to a company with a healthy and strong brand. Just like a heart, there is a degree of fragility in maintaining healthy vital signs. And it's imperative to monitor those signs and be proactive about mitigating potential issues. So before proceeding onward with the rest of this podcast, to cover the four main phases of travel planning, building an expense plan for paid media, some steps for creating a content calendar, and getting into a probability of conversion matrix, you first need to answer some questions about the current state of your brand. And here are questions that I would advise on you visiting before you start. So number one, what are your core brand values and your company vision? What are you aspiring to be? What are you marching towards? Why do you exist? Do you have established foundational brand pillars that support your values? Do you have brand positioning statements derived from your brand pillars? Can you articulate what problems your brand solves for? Do you and the employees at your company know why your company exists? If your company can be reviewed and rated online, what are your scores? What are your averages? And how does your company prioritize replying to public reviews and ratings if that's available? And what are the good and bad things that people are saying about your brand? Does your brand have a specific cause or mission that it supports and builds its identity around? And if you could change one thing about your brand, what would it be? So I cannot stress enough the importance of taking time to evaluate your brand strengths and weaknesses and take an honest and real world approach to addressing those questions that I just went through. And be quick to diagnose any issues going on and work with people internally on helping resolve whatever might be going on. And it's critical to understand if you need a stitch or a stent to repair those issues. Okay, so let's continue onward. Coming up next, we're going to get into the four phases of travel booking and how this affects your marketing strategy. Stick with us. The Travel Insights podcast is powered by Battleface. Battleface has cracked the partnership code by offering one-of-a-kind products uniquely designed for how partners, travelers see the world, all backed by 24/7, 365 global assistance services. It's the perfect combination of winning an attachment and enhancing lifetime value. Battleface, built for today's travelers and building for tomorrow's. While the average consumer books a trip 3 months before departing, there's a lot more that goes into the planning process leading up to the point of paying for and actually booking a trip. Have you ever heard the saying, the best time to plan a trip is when you get home from one? Well, understanding the seasonality patterns with typical travel, particularly in the US market, it actually aligns with this often satirical statement. And here's how. It should be no surprise to anyone that in the US market, the two lowest months of travel are January and February. Generally speaking, everyone is broke from the holidays, compounded by kids and college students returning to school. So, for the purposes of this segment, let's use the top travel month of July in the US as an example to capture and outline the main phases of travel planning. So again, July being the top travel month, right? When people are departing. So again, that's what we're using here as the example. So let's work backwards to get there. So December and January. So while December is a high month for holiday travel, planning for summer vacations often begins around the holidays into January. This phase is usually summarized as the inspiration phase when travelers know they aren't quite ready to book yet, but love to be inspired by something new or something trendy. So, as we get into February and March, that inspiration phase might shift into a different phase, which is passive or in some cases active searching to start budgeting for a July trip. But typically, these months are less active because of upcoming spring break trips that take place in March or sometimes in early April. It's the calm before the storm when searching and comparing really starts to heat up. So as we get into April, the active search, price shopping, and comparing is in full force. So it's nearly the end of the school year, and families are wanting something to look forward to and to do during the summer break. And a lot of trip. A lot of trip bookers will make the decision and lock in a trip for July and in April, while some may delay a bit into May to let the bank account rebound a little bit more following the return from spring break. And there is, of course, um, variability to consider here, but the data does not lie for when travelers are number one, booking trips and when they depart, and number two, the months of the year when they are traveling most. All of this is publicly available. You can get it from the Department of Transportation. You can get it from TSA. All of it's there. So those are the four main phases of trip booking. Just to summarize, you have the inspiration phase. Second, you have the passive searching phase, followed by the more active searching and price comparing phase. And then, of course, you have the booking phase. So, those being the four primary phases of travel. If you paid attention in the previous segment, the dots should start connecting to a certain extent. And there are several important factors to keep in mind, but none may be as important as proper segmentation and messaging. Without either, you're likely setting your campaigns up and your investment. You're setting both those up for potential failure. So, word of caution, be particularly mindful of segmentation and messaging. All right. So before diving in, I am going to hold off from offering specific advice on where to invest your paid media budget. There are so many options available, and I can assure you they'll all gladly take your money. Um, and I could tell you, where I used to invest consumer marketing paid media dollars and call out the ones that worked well for me. But again, a lot has changed since I ran my last consumer travel campaign, and I do not want to give bad advice on where to spend. Again, with the myriad of options that exist. Um, you should know where your travelers or where your consumers spend the majority of their time. And of course, you want to be present there, keeping your brand present in those spaces. So for that, again, I'm going to hold off on offering specific advice on specific channel allocation. The point of this segment is when to spend and what to spend on. So we're going to start with the former, when to invest in paid media. So whether it's selling travel insurance or trip packages for consumers to buy, the end goal is pretty simple, right? It's the consumer chooses your brand to buy from when it's time to make a purchase decision. But how can you, as a consumer marketer, aid in that decision making process by way of paid media influence? First is investing in the right type of campaigns during the right times to build up strong brand recall. Impressions, click throughs, reach, frequency, and all other touch points matter. And if your paid media dollars are misallocated or don't align with the phases of trip planning, it could lead to disappointment. Also, if you're operating on a lean paid media budget, you must be diligent about when to invest because every dollar matters. So, what does this actually look like on a monthly basis? And for the sake of simple math, I'm going to use an example using a $1 million annual paid media budget. And just as a quick note, um, spreading $1 million out equally over 12 months is $83,333 per month. But you do not want to allocate your paid media budget in that way. We call that in the industry peanut buttering the budget, spreading it out equally. We definitely don't want to do that, not advisable. So let's start with the months of quarter one. So focusing specifically on January, February, and March. So these would generally be the peak months for inspiration and passive searching with high travel during the month of March. So for spring break, right? So my advice here is to ramp up your investment in brand awareness campaigns to over 50% of your available Q1 paid media budget. So, what that looks like from a mock budget perspective is that of that $1 million, you have 210,000 allocated for Q1. And on a monthly basis, what that would look like is having a coming out the gate strong in January and February at 75,000 in January, 80,000 in February, again, ramping up that brand awareness spend, but then toning down the spend in total for the month in March to about 55,000. And now that does seem like a pretty drastic shift by going from 80,000 to 55. But again, if you overspend in the month of March, it will likely be somewhat wasted dollars because your audience pool is not going to be as large because you're going to have so many people already traveling, right? So again, the summary here is less focus on consideration and retargeting type of campaigns and dialing down the spend during that month of March when people are traveling and focusing a lot on brand awareness during Q1. So now let's look at the months in quarter two. So for April, May, and June. So these would be the peak months for active searching and travel booking intent signals, with travel beginning to rise significantly starting in June to kick off the summer months. So for the months in quarter 2, I would recommend dialing back on brand awareness and ramp up consideration and retargeting campaigns to really capture the booking intent signals that you get from segments. So for consideration and retargeting combined, I would really look at about 60% of your available budget going to those specifically for your Q2 paid media budget. So what it would look like in terms of actual dollars is for Q2, you'd have about $250,000, so about 25% of your annual budget allocated in Q2. So what it would look like is pretty consistent month to month. So April, 80,000, May, 90,000, and June, 80,000. So again, pretty consistent in Q2. This is, again, a great time to really ramp up your investment, really focusing in on those travel intent signals to cash in on those opportunities. With travel really starting to pick up in the month of June. So now let's switch over to the months in quarter 3. So looking at July, August, and September, we're going to dial back spend in quarter 3 because this is peak summer travel, right? So the months of July and August are going to be the peak months, right? And there's going to be a major slowdown in September. So really what it would look like is from a budget allocation, it'll look somewhat similar to Q1 with a stronger emphasis on brand awareness type campaigns, with ramping up spend in September, with being the highest month of budget allocation in the quarter to account for the active holiday trip booking for the November and December months. So from a mock budget perspective and quarter 3, we're looking at about 180,000 total for the quarter. This will be your lowest spend quarter of the year, again, because of so many people traveling in July and August. So what it would look like in terms of dollar allocation. So July at 50,000, August at 60,000, and then peaking at 70,000 in September, again, to account for the potential searching of holiday trips for the months to come. So now, as we get into the quarter 4 months of October, November, December, the peak travel months, of course, are November and December, specifically for Thanksgiving and Christmas trips, a combination of heightened air travel and road trips. But pivoting the budget back to more allocation to consideration and retargeting campaigns to account for stronger trip booking intent, particularly in October. Plan to allocate approximately 55% of that quarter 4 budget to those types of campaigns while ramping back up on brand awareness into December to reach the inspiration and passive searching audience segments, beginning to plan spring break and summer travel for the upcoming year. So for a mock budget for Q4, would look like this. So you'd have about 210,000 in Q4 to play with, keeping the budget, pretty consistent from September to October at 70,000 in October, ramping down in November because again, a lot of travel is taking place in November, and then ramping it back up in the month of December with that focus on brand awareness to 90,000. So that's the full year by quarter and by month. If you've been doing the math, you'll realize that annual budget does not add up to 1 million. And that is by design. I always recommend withholding approximately 15% of your available paid media budget as a testing fund for channel alternatives or a rainy day fund to go after a new segment or a new campaign concept more aggressively. So, coming up next, we are going to go into content planning for a given year and what topics to focus on, both on a quarterly schedule as well as the importance of maintaining evergreen content and campaign themes throughout the year. Stick with us. We'll be right back. This is the Consumer Travel Marketing Masterclass Part 2 of our series. And for this next segment, we are going to look into planning out a year's worth of travel content. I am going to try to keep this a bit high level, but the reality is that year after year, there are consistent patterns in travel behavior that don't typically change. There are the best times of year to visit specific locations, like Japan in the spring, beaches in the summer, Midwest locations in the fall, see the foliage, and of course, mountains in the winter. I live in Colorado. I can tell you that the tourist activity out here in the months of December up until March is pretty crazy. All of which can be and should be planned out in an organized content editorial type of calendar. What is also consistent year after year in the world of travel are topics, right? That you'll generally see widely covered by travel companies or media companies, Weather Channel, for example. So these topics that are consistent year after year, again, specifically in the U.S. market, are as follows. First, you have wave season, which is a time of year when cruise lines will offer the most significant discounted plan or the most significantly discounted cruise options, usually between January and March. You, of course, have spring break travel in the US, as we've talked about. This always falls in late March or early April, regardless if you have a traditional school calendar or a balanced calendar. This is ordinarily when K through 12 and colleges will have a break. So, as you start to get into the summer travel months, we of course have touched on that this is the busiest time of year for travel, with trips happening between late May into early August. Now, the other thing that kind of goes on right around, I want to say it's May or June, up until all the way until November, is hurricane season. Hurricane season is an interesting one. It is obviously well tracked by NOAA, but also too in recent years we've seen hurricanes not just intensify in strength and by the category and the level of destruction that they cause, but also in the number of hurricanes that happen. So that time period again is around May to November, with the peak hurricane season generally happening around that August to October timeframe. And of course, that's down in the Gulf of Mexico and the Atlantic coast area. So that's something to be very mindful of from a content perspective. Whether you're offering trip packages or cruises or even travel insurance for that matter. And on the topic of travel insurance and hurricane season, one thing that I will preface is that it is very important that if you are taking a trip during hurricane season and you're booking your trip well in advance, that you'll want to buy a travel protection plan at the time that you're booking the trip and not close to your departure date. Because once a hurricane is named, it is a known event. So you cannot purchase coverage after it is named because it's known. So again, it's very important from a travel insurance perspective with regard to hurricane season to buy your plan early rather than wait. So, moving on, of course, there's Thanksgiving in the US every year. And then, of course, we have the holidays around Christmas and Hanukkah in the month of December, a lot of travel going on there. So those are the very predictable, I'd say, travel content themes in the cycle throughout the year. So whether you're planning to create content to inform or educate, inspire or motivate, or create some kind of sense of urgency, you can't go wrong by aligning your brand messaging to those topics. But do not forget about a consistent and always on brand message playing in the background. So, going back to part one of this series, be mindful of the problems your customers face and how you can act as a guide to call them to action to help them solve their problems. And as a reminder, your customers are the heroes in their own stories. You, the brand, should not position yourself as a hero, but you are a counterpart to help be a guide to help solve them and lift them up in their hero status. So play that type of message on repeat across multiple distribution channels to enhance recall when the time is right for them to book a trip or buy a travel insurance plan. Okay, so coming up in our last segment, we are going to dive into the deep end of the pool and we're going to talk about one of my favorite topics, which is a probability of conversion matrix. Don't miss it. We'll be right back. The Travel Insights podcast is powered by Battleface. Battleface started in the UK market in 2018, offering travel protection to journalists covering news stories in conflict zone areas. What began as one product in one country has expanded into a global, multi-regional company on a mission to power the travel insurance industry. Battleface, built for today's travelers and building for tomorrow's. Welcome back. Clay Coomer here, host of the Travel Insights podcast, powered by Battleface. And in this last segment of the podcast, we're going to dive into how to use a probability of conversion matrix to help you win at efficiency and in performance marketing. So admittedly, I had to wipe the dust off of this one to a certain extent. It's been a while since I've last leveraged this type of approach in consumer travel marketing. But from my experience, this is a tool to not only help you optimize your campaigns, but also advance your marketing career if it's used the right way. And I saved it for last because it is the most advanced topic that we'll cover in this series. And it will only make sense to use after you've launched paid media campaigns and have a couple of months of data to use for the matrix. And I have to give credit where credit is due. I did learn this technique from a former boss of mine at Seven Corners, Chief Marketing Officer Greg Jung. He had the foresight to bring in economist from his alma mater at Purdue University to help us with efficiency. And this was the output that greatly helped us, and a tool that I've continued to use throughout my consumer travel marketing career. So let's dive into it. And the first place you'll need to start, again, after you have performance data to use, is gathering KPI within an Excel table. So the rows should be the channels which you have focused your efforts on. So whether it's paid search, paid social, influencers, affiliates, or organic search, for each of those channels, there's going to be metrics and data available that you'll want to use. So for the columns, will be the KPI that you're gathering for each channel. So including things like impressions, clicks, click through rate, website traffic, whether that's unique users or sessions, number of conversions, revenue attributed to the campaigns, total cost for each, conversion rate, average revenue per conversion. Um, then you're going to want to look at cost per acquisition or CPA. And then you'll want to look at return on effort, or as some refer to it as ROAS, return on ad spend. I like to use return on effort because, if you look at organic search or, influencers, for example, not technically ad spend per se. So that's why I like to use the word effort, because there's effort that's involved. So for CPA, cost per acquisition, you're looking at total cost divided by the number of conversions. And for return on effort, you're looking at total cost divided by revenue. So once you have all the data in your table, you'll begin to see a clearer picture of which channels have been working the best. And to be fair, there are a number of ways to slice up this data. But the example that I'm giving here is to utilize it within a scatter diagram with a Y and X axis to determine the optimal channels to spend your time on. Naturally, you'll immediately want to focus your attention on your overall cost per acquisition and return on effort on a per channel and holistic basis. Those are obviously important measurables that I would never diminish under any circumstance. Plus, your CEO and CFO will inevitably care most about those two specific metrics, so you can answer the unavoidable ROI and efficiency questions that will come up. So you can create more than one scatter plot diagram using the KPI from the spreadsheet, and you can start with using both cost per acquisition and return on effort within the same graph. Now, both metrics are technically dependent variables, meaning both include two data points within an equation, and one is dependent on the other. But for the purposes of this exercise, it's essentially a non-factor to get where we're going. So for your Y vertical axis, you'll want to title it cost per acquisition in dollars. And you're going to want to start from the bottom at 0 and then go up to the highest dollar amount present that is within your data table. So if you have 0 up to $100 CPA, then that's what it should look like, broken out in increments of 10 or 20, whatever makes the most sense. So on your X or horizontal axis, you'll want to title that one ROE or return on effort. Some people will use return on ad spend or return on effort. They'll use that in a percentage. Others will do it in dollars. For consistency with CPA being in dollars, I would advise setting your return on effort equation in your data in the context of dollars. And to me, it's more easily explainable. So if you generate a return on effort of $4, for example, you generated $3 in revenue for every $1 spent. Similar to your y-axis, start at 0 to the furthest left, up to the highest dollar amount present from your data table for return on at the return on effort KPI. So if you had an ROE of $10 for a channel, be 0 to 10 in increments of 2 or 1, whatever makes sense. So once you have that set up, you can begin plotting your KPI within the graph using the CPA and ROE metrics from the data table. And you'll want to be sure to label each with the correct channel. And what you'll begin to see visually is channel variance. Some channels may have a low CPA and a low ROE, right? And if that is the case, you'll need to take your analysis a step further and look into the details of that specific channel. Perhaps there was a lower volume of spend and a lower value per conversion, right? If that's the case, you'll need to check your targeting. You could have an amazing channel lying in wait if you could figure out a strategy to maximize cart value without adversely impacting conversion. You also may have a channel or two with a low CPA and a high return on effort. So while on the surface, they may make you enthusiastic about ramping up the spend, you need to check to be sure your spend allocation isn't already tapped out from running high converting, retargeting, bottom funnel campaigns within that channel. That's a word of caution because if you try to increase your spend in retargeting, you may indirectly see a negative impact within the campaign by throwing off your frequency ratio, which is the impressions divided by reach. So that is something to be mindful of. And context is very important when looking at this analysis with an objective eye. You will likely see performance from top of funnel brand awareness campaigns at the CPA and ROE level. It might look poor. However, that does not mean you should stop those efforts. And here is what you do instead. This is my lovely cheat code here to help justify brand awareness spend. Open up your Google Search Console and run an analysis during the same time frame as your paid media data set that you just covered to build out that matrix, right? Focus only on brand search terms and look at the trends compared to the previous period and compared to the prior year. If you are seeing brand search growth by way of increased impressions or even better, increased clicks, that is a foolproof indicator that you're doing something right at the awareness level to get people to search for your brand in Google. And again, there are several different ways that you can slice this data up. Again, for example purposes, we obviously looked at cost per acquisition and return on effort, with those being critical KPI. But of course, there are influencing indicators, and you can create your own charts using those, right? So you could make one chart that has a y-axis of conversions and your x axis is sessions, right? You can slice it up in a number of different ways. One of the other variations of this that I would recommend doing, from a conversion rate perspective, is to have one axis be conversion rate and another one be customer customer acquisition, right? That way you can see the cost per acquisition and conversion rate in the same view, to really help tell a powerful story on probability of converting with how much it costs to get that conversion. Very, very powerful data, will really help you accelerate in your performance marketing. So that concludes the last segment here of the podcast. Stick with us. We're going to summarize everything we learned, and then we will send you on your way. Stick with us. We'll be right back. And we are going to quickly recap some of the main takeaways from the second part of our series of the Consumer Travel Marketing Masterclass. So, within this particular podcast, we started out with why brand matters, and we covered a series of questions that you'll want to answer regarding your brand before you really start to dive into some of the more tactical things to execute on a consumer travel marketing strategy. So, again, your brand is the heart of your company, and having a healthy heart, of course, will make everything else better. Love the heart analogy. We then covered the 4 phases of the consumer trip booking cycle. Again, a lot of seasonality here that really gets into inspiration, passive searching, active searching, comparing, price shopping, and of course, booking, and aligning your paid media strategy to those 4 phases. We covered a mock budget scenario using $1 million budget and how to allocate it throughout the year by quarter and by month. And of course, rule of thumb, retaining 15% of your budget as a rainy day fund for testing or allocating to new channels. Then we covered planning out a year's worth of travel content with some of the reoccurring themes that happen on an annual basis in the world of travel, with an emphasis on the US market. One thing to take away there is being mindful of hurricane season, as it can greatly impact travel, particularly with travel to the southeast. And then we just got through the probability of conversion matrix with a couple of scenarios there, one of which was using the cost per acquisition and return on effort approach, but also too, you can look at it with a conversion rate metric tied to your cost per acquisition. Again, very powerful insights that can really help you excel, not just in performance marketing, but also in your career. And again, your CEO and CFO will greatly appreciate seeing this level of data in a simplistic way to help you get more budget in the future. So that has been part 2 of our Consumer Travel Marketing Masterclass. Thank you so much for tuning in. I am Clay Coomer, head of marketing at Battleface and former consumer travel marketing expert, now helping you create your plans going forward. We'll see you again next time on the Travel Insights podcast, powered by Battleface. Thanks so much.